Hello, class. I hope everybody is still safe and healthy. Like you, I've gotten more casual. My hair's getting darker, awkward length, no nails, all the COVID problems. But keeping on with our class, we only have 2 chapters left to cover this semester. And then you'll have some time, and I'll put all of this out in an announcement, so you've got, reminders about the end of the semester timeline. But we've just got to go through chapters 23, chapters 24, and then you'll have a couple of weeks to get the last 2 assignments done. As you know, we're not going to the courthouse, obviously. They've actually just announced today they're continuing to close the courts until at least May 31st. So I've gotten a substitute assignment posted on Blackboard for you. I've already put out information on that, but I'll continue to do so. So you'll have a couple of weeks to do your current events assignment and do that assignment as well before the final exam. So, jumping into chapter 23. Chapter 23 is going to cover personal property, and specifically bailments, which we'll obviously talk about. And then chapter 24, as opposed to real property, is going to talk about, as opposed to personal property, is going to talk about real property. So you'll see once we talk about personal property, I'm not talking about land, I'm not talking about your house, I'm talking about personal property. And then in chapter 24, we'll talk about real estate, my favorite thing to talk about. So chapter 23, types of property. Number 1, real property, R-E-A-L. That is the land and everything of value attached to it. All right, so real property, that's what we're going to cover in chapter 24. It's the land and everything of value that's attached to it, like your house, your driveway, your outside shed, all that kind of stuff. So point A, the transfers generally involve a written sales contract and a deed, D-E-E-D, that is recorded with the state. Okay, so when you sell your property, your real estate, your real property, the land and everything on it, you do that by giving the new buyer a deed. All right, so then what we're going to talk about is number 2, personal property. Personal property is property that is movable. All right, so obviously I can't move your house. I can't move the driveway. All that's fixed to your real estate. Personal property, on the other hand, is movable. And point A, it can be transferred with a minimum of formality. A minimum of formality. So it's a whole lot less formal than deeding somebody your house when you sell them your personal property. Okay, so the main type of personal property we're going to talk about involves a bailment. And you've participated in bailments your whole life. You've just never thought about them as being called a bailment, nor have you thought about the rights or the obligations of all the parties involved in a bailment. So a bailment means entrusting the personal property. So again, bailment is only for personal property. Entrusting the personal property of one person, who's the bailor, B-A-I-L-O-R, to the care of another person, the bailee, B-A-I-L-E-E, who is obligated to return the bailed property to the bailor or dispose of it as the bailor directs. Okay, so when you have a bailment, we're only talking about personal property that can be bailed. The person who owns the property is the bailor, and the person who's obligated to do with it what they're supposed to do is the bailee, and that bailee is obligated to return it to the bailor. Best example I can give you, dry cleaning. And I don't even know if everybody still does that. I do not ever go to the dry cleaners. However, my husband, I think he goes 3 times a week. I only buy stuff that can be put in the washing machine and the dryer. So, moving on though, a dry cleaning example. So when I drive up to the drive-through, or to the dry cleaning, I'm going to drop off my property, my suits, my dresses, whatever. I'm the bailor, I own them. I'm not giving them or selling them to the dry cleaner. I'm giving them to them to do what they're supposed to do with it, and then they're supposed to return it to me after their work's finished. Okay, so whenever we talk about bailments, think about the dry cleaning example, and there's a million more too. So types of bailments. Number 1, the first type is a bailment for the bailor's sole benefit. And the reason it matters what type of bailment we're talking about is because your rights and your obligations differ as to which type of bailment it is. So number 1, bailment for the bailor's sole benefit. This is a gratuitous bailment made for the bailor's convenience and benefit. So if it's for the bailor's sole benefit, then it's made for the bailor's convenience and benefit. Okay, so let me tell you this. Best example of this. Storing your boat in somebody else's garage. The person who is keeping your boat in their garage is getting no benefit out of that. Actually, it's a burden and it's probably annoying to them, but they offer to do it because you're their friend. So I'm the bailor, I own the boat. I say, hey neighbor, can I store this in your garage over the winter? Okay, well, I'm not giving it to them. I'm just using their garage. That bailment arrangement is for my sole benefit. They're getting nothing out of it. Okay, so that's the first type of bailment. Number 2, bailment for the bailee's sole benefit. This is a gratuitous bailment, and when I talk about gratuitous bailment, I mean there's no money being involved. Nobody's getting paid for anything. A gratuitous bailment made for the bailee's convenience and benefit. This is borrowing your friend's boat. Okay, if I borrow my friend's boat, I'm not getting any, or they're not getting anything out of it. I'm not paying them for it. It's for me, the bailee's sole benefit. So they have not given me their boat, but instead I'm borrowing it and I have to return it to them. But I'm the only one getting a benefit from it. Okay? And number 3, the dry cleaning example. This is what we talked about. Is the most common type of bailment situation. This is the dry cleaning example. So this is bailment for the bailor's and the bailee's mutual benefit. It involves the bailor, the owner, compensating the bailee for services that the bailee renders. Okay, so this bailment situation is for our mutual benefit. It involves the bailor compensating the bailee for the services that he renders. So this is your dry cleaning example. We both get a benefit out of it. You dry clean my clothes, I pay you for your services, and we all go back to normal. Okay, that's the most common type of type of bailment situation that you'll run into. Okay, so the bailee's rights. What kind of rights do they have whenever they're holding on to your personal property for whatever reason? So absent a contrary agreement, the bailee has, number 1, the right to control and possess the bailed property during the terms of the bailment agreement. So they didn't steal anything from you. When they have your dry cleaning at their store, they have the right to control and possess it. All right. Number 2, in some cases, they have the right to use the bailed property. So they don't have the right to wear my clothes. But you can see in some of these boating examples, in some instances, the bailee has the right to use the bailed property. Number 3, they have the right to compensation. If that's part of your arrangement, like the dry cleaning example, they have the right to be compensated then for holding on to your property. And number 4, they have the right to limit their liability for damage to the bailed property. I'm sure when you signed up at the dry cleaner, you signed some kind of agreement that limits their liability if anything happens to your property while it's in their control. Of course, they've got insurance, they've got all that good stuff, but they do have the right to limit how much they're liable for when they're holding on to your bailed property. Okay, now you've heard their rights. Now what are the bailee's duties? So again, the bailee, remember, they're the person holding on to the property. Absent a contrary agreement, a bailee must, number 1, take reasonable care of the bailed property. All right, they have to take reasonable care of your property that they're holding on to. And number 2, they have to surrender the bailed property, and then I've got a typo, to the bailor, not the B-A-I-L-E-R, but the B-A-I-L-O-R. They have to surrender the bailed property to the bailor or dispose of it if that's what they're supposed to do under the bailor's instructions. All right, so they have the right to do some stuff with the property, but they have duties towards that property and towards the bailor as well. Now the bailor, so those were what we were talking about with the bailee. The bailor's duties. The duties of a bailor are essentially the same as the rights of the bailee. Okay, so again, the bailee has the right to be compensated. Well, then that is a duty of the bailor. If the bailee has the right to be compensated for the property, then the bailor has the duty to compensate the bailee. Okay? All right. Last but not least, there are some special types of bailments that your book covers. Number 1 is the common carrier. This is someone who provides publicly available transportation services for a fee and is strictly liable for any loss or any damage to the bailed property after taking delivery of the bailed property. Okay, so think of these common carriers that are publicly available transportation services, the mail, and they are going to be strictly liable for any loss or damage to the bailed property after taking delivery of it. Okay, so these are special types of bailments. Point A under that, they are not going to be strictly liable for any loss or damage to the bailed property resulting from, point 1, an act of God, tornadoes, storms, whatever is considered an act of God that would put the damage out of their control. Point 2, a public enemies act, war. Point 3, the bailor's act. So if you put fireworks in the mail and they explode, then obviously the common carrier is not going to be strictly liable for that. A governmental order, so if there's orders like there are right now with COVID and whatnot that prohibit them from delivering the property and it causes damage to it, blah, 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 obviously the governmental order is going to be a defense that they have to any liability for damage of your bailed property. And number 5, the bailed property's inherent nature. That goes to fireworks, explosives. That's why they say you can't mail that kind of stuff. But if there is anything that's being bailed that is inherently dangerous in nature, then obviously they're going to have a defense to the strict liability that a common carrier would typically have when handling the bailed property. Number 2,